Welcome back to another M&S tutoring video, and in this video we're going to be learning about the sine and cosine law. Similar to many of the trigonomic ratios, the sine and cosine law does use many of the ratio formats, but in this case, sine and cosine law do not require the triangle to have a right angle. So the sine law is mainly used to solve for missing angles and sides in a triangle, and you need either two angles and one side or two sides and one angle to use the sine law. So let's look at when the sine law can be used. So say for example I have a triangle over here, and I'll label this triangle A, B, and C again. So remember, using the sine law, the triangle does not have to be right angled. So that's a really good distinct feature about the sine law. So here we have triangle A, B, and C, and over here you have side C, which is opposite to angle C. You have side A, which is opposite to angle A, and you have side B, which is opposite to angle B. Now, the sine law works as it's a ratio comprised of all the different angles to all the different sides. The sine law states, before I get into the sine law, I'm just going to mention that this is angle A, this is angle B, and this is angle C. So the sine law states that in any triangle, I'm still writing in blue, A, which is side A, over sine of A, so this sine of angle A, should equal to B, side B, over sine of B, angle B, and side C over sine of angle C. So that is the sine law when you are used to solve for missing sides. So this is the ratio you would use to solve for missing sides. If you look at this ratio, it's really quite similar to the similar triangles ratio when you're solving for the different sides using the side proportions. But now it involves the sine of the different angles rather than just whole numbers. So now let's look at what ratio you would use when you're solving for missing angles. Well, when you're solving for missing angles, it's just quite the missing sides ratio just flipped around. The reason we use two different ratios when solving for missing sides and when solving for missing angles is because it makes it a lot easier when actually solving, because the operations are no longer flipped. So you no longer have to take the inverse of the sign and then divide it by A. You just have to do one step in order to get the answer. So that's why we use two different ratios for missing sides and missing angles. So sine B over B is equal to sine C over C, right? It's really similar. And again, this is used for missing angles, right? So now let's actually look at an example that we can use for the sine law, and let's look at how we can actually solve this. So say for example we have this triangle over here. We have triangle A, B, and C, right? Triangle A, B, and C. And if you really want to use sine law or any of the sine law, whether you're solving for missing angles or missing sides, you have to remember that you have to complete an entire ratio. So you have to have you have to have either angle A and side A, or you have to have any one complete ratio. So if this is side A, this is side C, and this is side B, to use the sine law, you have to have either one. You have to have either all of side B and angle B. You have to have all of side A and angle A, or you can have you can have the angle C and side C. So basically, you have to complete one entire ratio for you to solve the missing sides or angles in the sine law. So now let's look at a triangle. Let's say we have triangle ABC over here, and let's say instead of actually using A, B, and C, let's use real numbers, and we'll try and solve this triangle using the sine law. So let's say for example side BC is 24 meters, and side HJ, sorry, not HJ, AC. I'm looking off my textbook over here. Side AC is a variable. We don't know how big that side is in meters, so we'll call it X. But we do know that side GH is 16 meters. I said GH. Its side AB is 16 meters. And we also know that angle B is 68.65 degrees. So 68.65 degrees, right? And we also know that angle A is 72 degrees. Now, what we want to solve for is angle X. So let's solve using the missing sides ratio. So the missing side ratio states that all the sides have to be on top, and all the angles, the sine of all the angles has to be on the bottom. So let's make an equation right over here. So 24 over sine 72 is equal to 16 degrees. Sorry, not 16 degrees. 16. I am off my game today. I don't know. 16 over whatever C is. We can actually solve for C using the 180 degrees rule of a triangle. We can say that 180 minus 68.65 minus 72, and we can solve for angle C and find out it's 39.35. So sine of 39.35 is equal to X over sine 68, let's go 68.65, right? So let's isolate both of these over here, and let's solve for X. And it's really that simple. All you have to do is solve for X using this law, and you'll get the value of X really fast. And it's the same thing for you if you want to set it up for missing angles. I'm not going to take the process to do that because all it is setting up the ratios, and I feel like you guys should be really comfortable with doing that. So now let's actually look at the cosine law. The cosine law is really similar to the sine law, as it involves kind of like a formula ratio type to solve for missing sides and angles. So the cosine law is used when there's actually not enough info to solve using the sine ratio. So remember when I mentioned below above that the sine ratio can only be used when you have an entire ratio, when you have angle A and you have side A, or when you have angle A and you have side B. Well, if you don't have a whole ratio, you need to rely on the cosine law. So the cosine law states that, say for example, you have this triangle over here. We'll call it triangle A, B, and C, right? So let's make a little squiggly line here, and now we're going to be learning about the cosine law. So the cosine law actually states that it's quite similar to the sine law, as I mentioned before, but the cosine law states that you could use it when you have side, 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 when you have all three sides and you're looking for an angle inside the triangle, or you have side, angle, side. And you have to remember the angle has to be contained between the two sides. So the angle has to be like this, right? And you have this side and you have this side. So now let's actually look at the cosine law and the formula that's used with it. So say for example you have side, angle, side. So say for example you have side B. I'm gonna highlight it. Sorry, I'm gonna underline it with blue over here. You also have side C, and you have angle A, right? Now to solve for that, what you're really solving for is side A, right? So if you're really solving for A, the formula is simply A squared is equal to B squared plus C squared minus 2BC times cos A, right? The way this formula was actually formed was using the Pythagorean theorem with a combination of the quadratic formula. Right off the bat, I don't really know how this formula was really formatted, but I do know it was a combination of both of those formulas. So that's the formula which is you'd simply use to solve for the missing side, which is side A over here. and say for example you had all three sides, but you didn't have angle A. Well, all you do in this case was you'd use another cosine formula. And just like the sine formula, how there was two different formulas, if you rearrange this formula and isolate for cos A, you get in this case you get cos A is equal to B squared plus C squared minus A squared over 2BC, right? And now that you have that, all you're doing is you're isolating for A and then taking the inverse cos of whatever answer you get over here to find angle A. So that's how you use it for angles, and as I mentioned above, that's how you do it for side angle side scenario as well. The one thing you have to really keep in mind is when you're solving using the side angle side, when you're using cosine law, is that you have to find the angle opposite of the longest side. So say for example, A in this case over here, A was the longest side. Well, to solve, you'd have to find this angle first because it was opposite to the longest side. And that's just a rule you have to follow when you're looking at the cosine law, when the side statement is there, because if you don't really do that, you won't get the most accurate results. So that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you learned something new. If you have any comments or concerns, please feel free to leave it down in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching, guys.